Welcome back, everyone. Hope you are still on the startup to IPO stage and enjoying very, very interesting panels. We're going to even have something way more niche and way more interesting. I'm more than excited just to see how it's going to go. Just remember that follow hashtag CogX 2021 and follow us on social media. And if you like whatever you're listening to, make sure that you're going to share it everywhere. At the same time, I'm not going to spend too much time here because I really want to give all of the time to the next moderator and at the same time, the amazing speakers that they lined up. It is going to be about cannabis and sex, overcoming barrier to build a taboo businesses. So whoever is very much interested into taboo businesses and then try to have a more niche and more inclusive business for themselves, this is the right place to be. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Pippa, the partner of the Sweet Capital, on stage. And I'm sure that Pippa is super organized, so she is going to be a great moderator. Hi, Pippa.
Hi, Ahmed.
It was great. Huh? Yeah, so stage is yours, and I'm just going to be in the background listening to everything. Good luck.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. And I'm going to take issue with the fact that you said they're niche businesses, because I also often think niche suggests that they're small industries, which I think are actually the total opposite. So, but anyway, we will get to that. But hi, everyone. It's so great to be here today. I hope you're having a great time attending the event, wherever you're dialing in from. I'm here in the UK at the moment. For those of you who haven't come across me before, my name is Pippa, and I'm a partner at Sweet Capital. The clue is in the name, founded by the founders of Candy Crush, King.com, after their exit to Activision Blizzard. And our focus is consumer and tech businesses. So it's my total honor to introduce our session today, which I think has got one of the most thought-provoking titles: Cannabis and Sex, Overcoming Barriers to Building Taboo Businesses. And now, while I think the title is slightly intentionally sensationalized, the reality is that these are actually huge, huge markets that as investors or consumers, we're just getting started with. I'd like to keep this session super conversational and make sure we have time for Q&A, which based on Ahmed's introduction, I'm hoping we do have a lot of interesting questions. So we're going to have a conversation for about 30 minutes, and then I am going to get about 10 minutes of Q&A at the end. So please put your questions into the app. I think you've got a chat box, and we will come to them. So it's my pleasure to introduce our two incredible founders who are joining me today, Amanda Goetz and Chloe Macintosh. Firstly, we have Amanda Goetz. So Amanda is the founder of House of Wise, the luxury CBD brand that's empowering women to have more purposeful intention and take control of their lives. She was previously CMO at Teal, a company that helps you navigate change and drive your career with confidence, and also spent 5 years at the Not Worldwide, formerly XO Group, and was Vice President of Marketing, overseeing brand and product marketing for the Knot and Wedding Wire. And we have Chloe Macintosh. So Chloe is the CEO and founder of Kama, a new mobile app that is aiming to make sexual wellness practices available for all. Chloe is actually a trained architect and started out her career at Foster & Partners in the UK before becoming co-founder of Made.com, an online furniture and homewares retailer, and was also global creative director for Soho House. Super exciting to have you both here today. As a reminder, just to the people listening, 30 minutes of conversation, and then please do put your questions in the box, and we'll get to them. So I've obviously given you both a fairly high-level introduction, Amanda and Chloe, but I am going to ask you to just quickly, briefly introduce your businesses and tell me a little bit about why you're so passionate about what you do. Amanda, let's start with you.
Well, thank you so much for the introduction. Like you said, we're empowering women to take control of their sleep, sex, stress, and wealth. And I started the company during the pandemic. It was something that was very passionate and intimate for me. I discovered cannabis when I was kind of at the height of my career, managing a large team for a global brand. We had just gotten acquired. I had 3 kids under the age of 4, and I had just filed for divorce. And like many women who struggle with, stress and anxiety in everyday life, sometimes situations arise and it doubles. And rather than turning to the nightly glass of wine, which was no longer serving me, I started to explore cannabis despite my own kind of stigma around it based on my kind of more conservative upbringing. And it helped me immensely. And so I started to tell my friends about the products I was using and how I was using them. And I realized that there was just so much barriers for women to adopt this, that there weren't a ton of brands that actually spoke to the woman who's really trying to have it all and needs help. And so the pandemic hit, and I realized that more and more women were turning to alcohol. And so I quit my job and launched this company. We soft launched in December of last year.
Congratulations. And Chloe, let's hear a little bit about you and Kama.
Yeah, so I set up Kama very similar to Amanda as the pandemic struck for the first time in the UK, where I'm based. I went to raise my seed round, my pre-product seed round, actually in June 19, and raised most of my capital from the US, actually, which I think part of the conversation, might be to explore, what it takes to raise money for those kinds of industries. Mm-hmm. And really, the ambition for Kama is twofold. One is to give people an education that sadly we never receive. So much of our sex education is about what not to do, and so little information we get as we grow up around how to improve our relation to sex, and also fully exploring the potential that sexuality can bring into our lives. So Kama really wants to become the number one destination for love, sex, and intimacy, a place where people can grow and learn while also having fun, because the main focus of our new modality, so we created a new modality, a new practice, is really focused on optimizing pleasure. With stress being the number one killer in the world today, responsible for about 60% of all illnesses and disease, pleasure is actually what we have built into our system as a way to quickly go back to homeostasis, which is balance. So in a world where, pain and suffering and the no pain, no gain kind of motto certainly drove my professional life and my life in the past, I realized that it was no longer sustainable for me to have, the kind of stress that Amanda is also talking about. And so in my case, really starting to be curious about the potential that pleasure has in our life, both, for our inner development, but also obviously relationally, and how we start using desires and what we really want as a way to drive our decisions across all aspects of our life.
So interesting. Thank you both for being here today. So, one of the things I said at the introduction is that I often find that businesses are overly trivialized or almost sort of made to be a novelty. And the reality is that the industries that you're building in are huge consumer markets. But at the same time, I do feel like there are some very real hurdles. So I'd love our conversation to kind of break these down into a few pieces. So let's start with the kind of core business models. Amanda, obviously one of the topics you focus on is CBD and cannabis, and a lot of people watching may be familiar with the cannabis market, as we have seen huge structural shifts in the industry in the last few years. But what's it like being on the ground as a founder? Have things got easier in recent years? Is it still as difficult as it always was? Tell us a bit about your experience.
Yeah, I joke that it's like the game whack-a-mole, like when you were a kid and you go and you like bop those different things because you think you're heading in a direction and then someone changes their regulations. So for example, like if you are trying to build a D2C company and you want to build on something like Shopify, Shopify uses Stripe. Stripe has an MRB clause. MRB stands for marijuana related business. So you can't use Stripe. So then now you have to find new technologies and e-merchant brokers to pass along to your bank. So that is a prime example of just payment processing and finding banks to support you. Now, luckily, when you're venture backed and you've raised capital, it does help you a little bit because it gives you a little bit more of kind of a foundation of trust. But that's one prime example. Another one is fundraising. I can give a very, very concrete example that happened just 2 weeks ago to myself. I'm raising my seed round and, it's been like 4 or 5 months of raising a couple $1 million. And I got a call that Silicon Valley Bank blocked 2 of our larger angel investments because it's an MRB. So even though I pitched, the investors were super excited, they wanted to put in the money, it was the bank that blocked their transfer. So these things kind of happen, and you just have to pivot. And what I would say, and I am so glad that you said that at the beginning, Pippa, that we can't trivialize these industries, because what's going to come out of these industries is innovation, like hard stop, because we're coming up with new distribution strategies that are not reliant on Facebook and Google. We're coming up with ways to build a company in a way that focuses on retention and LTV and has more connection to a community. So I'll pause there, but those are some of my initial experiences and thoughts.
And we will definitely go into fundraising in a bit of depth in a little bit, because I know that is one of the many structural barriers that, does stand for raising in these industries, which also, and this is a slightly separate topic, tend to be a fairly homogenous set of profiles at some of the venture capital funds and other capital sources. Chloe, tell us a little bit about, more specifically, the sexual wellness industry. Have things changed? Have things got easier? Where are we in the cycle for the industry?
I don't know if we know yet. All I know is I've been looking into this for 15 years, right? I started thinking that there must be an alternative to what was driving the interest online, which obviously has been pornography since it became vastly available and free. 30% of the world's traffic is still going to porn regularly. So very early on, as I became a mother, actually for the first time, so 16 years ago now, I realized that there was just no place for me to get informed and to relate to content or educational content that would really speak to me. And those sites haven't actually evolved very much in the past 15 years, because the monopoly is giving them no reason, to improve the experience. So what I see is that there is an enormous opportunity, and the opportunity is multiple fold. If you think about SEO, if you think about the fact that there is just no brand anyone can name really that's big enough as an editorial destination that owns this topic, right? It's very hard for people to tell me, you should look at these types of company as a way to compare, because we just don't have any. So there's a big low-hanging fruit in building an intelligent, informative brand that is tackling that topic in a way that's more educational, more mature. And prize has been the amount of support that I received from them, which I wasn't expecting. They white labeled us at our beta level, and since then they've put people at our disposal to try and understand, how they can kind of get on this wagon. Because my belief is, with a lot of the things we're doing and what Amanda was mentioning, is that if people don't make the effort and to really understand how to evolve with the market, because the market is clearly there around those topics. There's a huge demand. So when you are a big distribution platform, if you are not starting to have this conversation, which the like of Facebook, for example, is refusing to be having for so long, just not having a conversation at all, then what will happen is that we will end up finding those people elsewhere. We will go elsewhere, and it's already happening. So I think there is a disruption that's happening actually within the porn industry with the likes of OnlyFans, which is starting to show us that there is also resistance coming through there. The type of porn that's created is wholly different than what was there 15 years ago. So the industry, which at large today, the sex industry is still pornography, is evolving itself towards a demand that is no longer what it used to be. So that's the first sign. The second sign, of course, is that sexual wellness became a category, official category within the wellness sector about 3 years ago. And this is where I think venture capital investment can become a barrier sometimes, because they can't invest unless you have a category, because then you can't size the market, so you can't put a value on it. So the fact that it's taken so long for this category to exist is also been one of the reasons why things haven't really moved forward that much. So on one hand, obviously, you have nowhere to distribute. And on the other hand, you can't really raise money for these categories. For the longest time, we were in this particular, kind of situation, which was quite blocked. So it's only, I would say, 2-3 years that we started seeing startups raising seed capital for business that were labeled under the sexual wellness. And this is also a new direction away from maybe products, because I think the toy industry has evolved very positively online. But when it comes to the services, the education, the entertainment, the content, that's where obviously the opportunity is still very much open.
And before we go to fundraising, I think, a hurdle that you've both indicated affects you significantly in the business level is the distribution strategies, the marketing. And, in venture capital at the moment, this word community is such a buzzword. But I actually feel that within your respective industries, it's actually incredibly important, because when you're not unable to rely on SEO, on traditional marketing distribution, or certainly simply incumbents who are blocking keywords or aspects of, the ways that you can access your consumers, you do have to rely on organic, word of mouth, on community a lot more. So just, Amanda, you've said in the past, how can you have a brand succeed when Facebook and Google control the audience? Tell us a little bit about how, you've built community, some different ways that you're getting around some of those structural barriers. Nano influencers and multi-level marketing are two things you've mentioned to me in the past.
Yeah, so multi-level marketing, for those that don't know, it has a very negative stigma, and for very good reason. It's very predatory on women, and usually low socioeconomic status women. So it means that there is a person at the top of a pyramid that recruits people under them to be a part of their team. That person at the top gets percentages. So the reason this started is because women have influence. They have influence over their friends. They have influence over their communities. And I am from the Midwest in the United States, which is a very high population of people selling MLM products. So I've grown up for the last 20 years, like being sold and being asked to join teams. And I really went deep in understanding the actual psychodemographics of this, right? The psychographic details of what's drawing a woman to this, but then how do we make it less predatory? We have influencers. Influencer marketing has been around for years now, and they're getting high affiliate commissions to promote products. But my whole philosophy with House of Wise is we actually use that influencer affiliate marketing distribution strategy with everyday women. And there's no upfront costs, there's no icky recruiting, but they get to be a part of a company and a mission that they believe in and products that help them. They're going to tell their friends. And I believe cannabis specifically is an industry in sexual health and wellness that is going to happen by learning through someone you trust. And whether that's a founder that you trust that is accessible, or it's your friends that are accessible and telling you what they're using. And so we've gone hard in this idea of micro affiliate distribution. And so we have not spent $1 with Google or Facebook, because we're focused on giving the money to the women who are helping us grow this company and brand and spread awareness. And so far that has been a higher retention and higher LTV per customer, because they're actually invested, and they get into a Slack group where I give behind the scenes updates of what it's like to build a company, what I'm learning marketing this company. And I think a big part of community is actually feeling like it's a two-way street. I think a lot of brands think that they're building a community when they are speaking and projecting to a large group of people. But what the real bread and butter is when it's two-way, where you actually ask for feedback, you're listening. And so we are bringing what we call them our wise women. We're bringing them along every step of the way. They're helping us build this company. They're giving us packaging feedback. So that is a big part of what we're doing.
Fascinating. I saw an interesting tweet that said that the most important thing is to differentiate between audience and community, because actually often it is that one-way street that you're describing. But also interesting that you mentioned that a big part of what you're doing is actually education. So by the time that you actually acquire that customer, the LTV, the retention, all of those great metrics are likely to actually be stronger, because you have done a lot of that work up front, but you have to do the work. Chloe, tell us a little bit about your experience for the sexual wellness industry. And how you build a brand in sexual wellness when you're dealing with some of these incumbents putting up literal structures around what you can and cannot say.
So first, I'd say that if I was spending any marketing at this stage of my business, I would be doing something completely wrong, because I don't think you should be spending any marketing until you've got decent retention metrics, which has nothing to do with numbers. I mean, it's not about volume, right? So I think I'm still at the stage where we're trying to understand the market fit for what we do. When you create a category, pretty much, even though there's a couple of other apps doing similar things to what we do, the reason I raised a large amount of seed capital is because I wanted to stay free for as long as I could until I understood very precisely who this was for. As soon as there is a price on it, you are really making things much more subjective. So the fact that we have a free brand that's accessible to everyone, and the way that we've built and designed the brand, and this is where you can't compromise on that. We were lucky enough to, in a way, to create this brand when everything was shut down. It meant that we had an opportunity to create something that was very integral to our beliefs and values, that was orientated toward the mission, that hopefully was going to connect with the people, the early informers, the ones who see why sexual well-being is an intrinsic part of our overall, well-being and such an important part of our life. And that unless we practice it, like we do for everything else that we want to be good at, sex is when we think we're going to learn through another person. So even this idea to get across to people that in order to be better and enjoy your body better and enjoy your relationship better, you first need to work with yourself. Even that is such a new idea that in order for us to really understand who is it for, we need to be open to everyone. So we're still at a stage where our audience is anything between 18 to 75, 80-year-old. And then our community is made of the people who have wanted to really take part in the creation of the business. We have pilot groups every week with our community. We engage people with everything that we do. We test content with them. 8 out of 10 of the people that we talk to want to become a pilot tester, a member of our community. So there is a really big curiosity from people to learn and get close to a brand who's bringing something new to market. And then I would say the other side of it, so this is what we can do by building still a conversation of a social media. We did a lot of events on Zoom, like a lot of people did. Our community actually was created in that environment because it was the most, the biggest way for us to connect was actually to do this at that time. But when it comes to the other way for me building the brand is about looking at how the press is reacting to what you do. So the work that I do, which I used to do when I was at Made, is not tell you what the proposition is until I've seen how people speak about it. So it takes about 6 months to a year to really be attentive to the way that the journalists create the headline, because ultimately the way they create the headline is who you are. And it's very important for me at this stage not to prescribe an audience or not even to define the community, but to welcome the conversation coming from all aspects so that I can get a really good sense for who would pay for this, why we need a free proposition forever, because sex education should be free for everyone. And so really evaluating our market fit is around this initial kind of monitoring, how people are reacting, what's too much, what's not enough. So I'm still in the phase, we only been live for 6 months. So I would say for now, we do what we believe in. And because the message is so clear, I think, and because there's so much common sense that of course we should have an education, but of course we should look into this. And of course there should be an alternative to pornography when it comes to getting some information about it, that I think a lot of people have actually been waiting for something, not knowing that they have been waiting. But it's very clear that this comes as a solution for people who have been looking for something else than what's available today.
Sure. And I think the consistency in both of your answers, right, is around listening. It's actually around listening to the conversations, informing the product choices, everything from, literal product features all the way down to kind of how you're marketing and the brand that you're creating with your your audience, with that community, so as opposed to an audience. So just a reminder to please put any questions that you might have in the chat. We're going to move to them in about 5 minutes. I have a quick fire round that I'm going to probably leave right until the end. Now, we've kind of tried to avoid it for as long as we can, but we can't any longer. Fundraising, huge structural bottleneck, the third that we'll kind of run through today. Amanda, again, let's go back to you. Tell me about how your experience has been with fundraising. You hinted a little bit already that it's multi-layered, and that you've also had the kind of Silicon Valley Bank structural issues as well. Walk us through that. Has it changed? What could VCs do to make it better?
So a lot of VCs still have this under a vice category, which they're going to miss out on massive businesses that are going to be built. Like we were just talking about, like sexual health and wellness is now a category, but they are not changing fast enough with their terms and policies. Mm-hmm. So what you're seeing is this new crop of money, content creator funds, influencer funds, early exits, even just like strategic angels turning into funds. They're the ones jumping on these businesses because they know how big they're going to be. And you see a bunch of other legacy VCs that I would pitch to someone who, and I'm not trying to be ageist, but is younger, and they get super pumped and then they get blocked somewhere in the way. So I think it's important for VCs to make sure that they look around and understand who's at the table and who's helping them think about the future of their portfolio. And then another piece of it is who your LPs are and where they're taking money, and mm-hmm. what parts of the world they're taking money from, and how progressive those parts of the world are. Like, these are very real things. And as a founder, it was important for me when I was doing my research on which funds I was going to pitch to get as much of that information as possible up front. So that way I knew whether to, that this was even an open door. And so you definitely, if anybody is interested in who's investing in this space, get on Twitter, because those are the active investors. That's how I found all of my investors, is just being very active in the Twitter community. And they're the ones reaching out to, underrepresented founders and founders in categories that are considered a little bit more niche, like we said.
Mm-hmm. The reality is this is part of a wider diversification, representation conversation that we're not going to have time for today. But I think, Amanda, what you said about having decision makers around the table who actually represent today's consumers is so critical. And in many cases, as you described, you may have an incredible meeting with someone on a team, but then a decision maker will come along and actually say, well, actually, that doesn't fit into one of the kind of well-known categories that I'm comfortable with. And I think that, yes, this extends to a wider conversation. Chloe, tell me a little bit about your experience with fundraising. How has it been?
So first, I've been monitoring very closely that conversation. So I went in when I felt I had a really good chance of raising my capital, which is when there had been enough kind of other precedents where a fund who had never invested in something in this space actually decided to make that decision. And that was about 2 years ago now, that I felt, okay, it's actually possible to go into a meeting with partners in a fund and pitch them an idea like this, which, a few years ago was just not even possible at all. So I think that the timing is definitely something to look at. I also think that the market has changed a lot. And in the past, I think entrepreneurs really didn't feel that they had the choice over the funds that they would choose. And they felt that they were lucky enough if they were invested in. But with the huge growth of the VC community, both in Europe and the States, so many new funds have emerged, and so many new funds have emerged. And so I think that this creates a new opportunity for funds to be clearer about their brand, so that they can be also, the match between the entrepreneur and the fund, can be a little bit clearer, which a lot of funds have done that. And I find that extremely useful, so that they have a thesis that is very clear, and it's not everything. It's actually something specific. Yeah. So then when you recognize yourself in it, And when they really create a brand around it, you know you're going to be part of a great portfolio. So for me, the portfolio is key. I look at where they've invested and whether I will benefit from being part of that family of businesses, and also what I can bring to them, because my value is going to be like what I bring to that portfolio is something they don't have somehow. So I look at it from that standpoint, really helping them see my value in their making. And then the second thing I would say, which is hard, is never change your narrative. You know, I started raising money in Europe for a business where I thought I couldn't really explain what I wanted to do, because so many of the words I need to use are not the ones they used to use, you know, in a boardroom. And think about this. This is a group of people who have been told their entire professional life that sex and work should never meet. So when you talk to them about sex, they're already a little bit on the defense, because now they're having a conversation about something that is just not possible to do at work. So there is this kind of barrier. But what was interesting is that when I went to the States, there is just more diversity, you know, in the type, in the age, in the source that compose those funds. And I think in Europe, a lot of funds come from traditional banking. It's a very kind of white, middle-aged men community, and that is not helping for what I'm doing. So when I went to the States, I realized that one, the wellness sector was extremely developed and much more, you know, I think the business sense that people had within wellness was very developed. And sexual wellness wasn't even a conversation. Yeah. Like I never had to explain why sexual wellness. So I ended up thinking, just never change your narrative, because if you change your narrative, you're not going to find a partner who are really ready to become ambassadors for your business. So I went in with the hard words and all of the difficult, you know, kind of vocabulary that shocks people a little bit, just to know who was able to take it and become a true partner. And I ended up with a group of investors who have never invested really directly in this field. But I think it's a stamp of approval for them that, you know, someone who has done other things before is going into this industry. And for me to be with investors who have not specialized in anything to do with taboo businesses before, it gives me a lot of credibility. So finding the meet between the two, I think, is also been like such an important part of, you know, why I think my investors pool is actually going to be a big instrument for my growth as well.
Great. We're going to move to a couple of questions, and then we're going to close out with a quickfire Q&A where I'm going to ask you guys to try and give a one-line answer to some quick questions. So changing gear a bit, I think in both of your industries, there's a chance that you're working with a new generation that wants something very different from their work-life balance or how they kind of associate with work culture. How do you build a company with working with this next generation that wants something very different to perhaps traditional working structures in the past? Chloe, I know this is something you're passionate about.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been part of, one of the biggest upside for me of this pandemic has been being able to reevaluate everything, obviously. And when we reevaluate everything, we very quickly realize that the way things are structured is just not the way we want to live. And so it's not just the younger people on my team, it's also myself. You know, after a long career, stressing out, commuting, going to offices, you know, being in an environment that's just not conducive to creativity or even wellness, to be honest, I have come to the conclusion that letting it just grow the way it's naturally growing at the moment, which is, you know, taking into consideration the limitations. And I have team in Portugal, in Turkey, in New York, in London and Manchester. And I was saying to Amanda just before we came on, you know, she's moved to Miami, so her team is also spread out. And what we realize is that actually we are able to do I'm able to do a better job. And I think that what needs to happen in this structure is to organize, you know, offsites regularly when the budget for an office is actually reinvested in everyone coming together for a week, getting to really know each other, enjoy each other, work together, strategize, and then let everyone live the life that they want to live. It's not affected the productivity whatsoever for me. If anything, I worry that there is no more, you know, kind of line between work and private life. And actually there is a need to create some kind of ritualized approach to how you structure your day. Otherwise, it's just a continuous, open-ended line of work, and you never stop. So I think that's been the change for me, creating a lot more structure and ritual to make sure that we can work in a way that's healthy. But I don't think I'll ever want to be in an office again.
Amanda, one to you. Where do you hope to see the industry 10 years from now? And you can define the industry as you like.
Yeah, I mean, I want to kind of continue on the culture line because I'm very passionate about this as well. But I think 10 years from now, I hope that women don't feel like they are choosing between work, kids, or, feeling any guilt or shame. I believe that the 9 to 5 was created in a very patriarchal society when we were going into factories and producing widgets. And as a single mom with 3 kids, I want to build a culture that really helps acknowledge all the roles a woman has to play in her life, and build a company that is focused on outcomes, not output or optics. And so that first and foremost is where I hope we get that more companies. I think the one silver lining of COVID was like people had to up their operating game. Yeah. They had to figure out OKRs. They had to figure out what is important and how are we measuring success. Otherwise, people are just not motivated and not going to work and not productive. And then similarly, like fewer meetings and making it all about impact versus effort. And so all of those things are kind of ingrained in what we do. We are, a 4-day work week. We are core working hours, 9 to 2:30, 3, right when school gets out. We don't have meetings kind of outside of those times unless it's necessary. And we have a very transparent work culture that allows people to set boundaries. Because I think we're just now learning how to set like relational boundaries in personal lives, but work boundaries are also a thing, and feeling less guilt around those.
I'm hopeful that as well, given that the barriers to hiring remotely will hopefully have reduced due to the pandemic, given that you guys are building in these, you could call them passion industries, I'm hopeful that has actually widened the pool of talent that you are able to hire for now that you're no longer restrained by just simply having to have someone that can come into a certain office every day. Now we're coming to the end of the session. We're going to do the quick fire. I'm going to ask you to just literally give a 1-line answer to each of these questions, and we'll see how many we get through. Okay, first one thing that you wish you'd known before you started. 1 line only, please.
That I should hire a data scientist as my second employee.
I was going to say a chief of staff as early as humanly possible to take off other things that take up so much time. But yeah, it was my first thought was hiring too.
Next one, the question that you're most frequently asked about building your businesses, and it can be good or bad.
Everyone's asking how to build a community. Like literally, I get that DM all the time. Like, how do you build a community? What are the thoughts? Like, it's a hot topic.
Chloe?
I'm not sure what question I get asked more often. How can I get a better orgasm is mostly what I hear.
Very important question.
I'm so glad that you said that. The biggest misconception about your respective industries. You only have 1 line, so I'm sure you could go on for a long time, but.
Right now, I have a federally legal product that Facebook blocks me for constantly, and we're abiding by every single rule. So it's federally legal in the United States.
And me is that what I'm doing is a taboo industry, and it's not. The young generation doesn't feel that way at all. At all.
That is definitely true. An ultimate 1 line of advice to founders who are building in your respective industries.
I mean, for me, it's like I get goosebumps, but it's really important, I think, to have a very personal and mindful approach. When you go into those industries, the last thing you want is another industry that's destroyed by bad technology. We've had this. We've had every single social media platform destroying our ability to connect. Let's build technology that truly help people, like not just short term, but long term. That's something for me that's really the most important.
Yeah, I think having a very personal mission is important because it's not easy. You run into roadblocks constantly. And when you wake up every day very, very passionate about helping women, in my case, feel better, perform better, have less dependency on alcohol in their lives, that when these roadblocks happen, you're not deterred as easily because you know that you have to keep going because there's so many players in the space that just saw, a green rush and ran into the space with very low quality products that really affect people. Yeah.
Guys, we are out of time. Thank you so much. Please just quickly tell us both how to find you on social media or your communities.
Yeah, we're we're houseofwise.co if you're interested in trying the products, if you're in the States. And then I'm most active on Twitter, Amanda M. Goetz.
We have our app on the App Store called Kama. Our website is kama.co. Our Instagram is kama.lab.
Awesome. Amanda and Chloe, thank you so much for a really good conversation today. I've learned a lot. And if we can encourage more people to not think of these as small niche industries, I think the better. And yeah, thank you so much for an interesting conversation. I'm going to wrap it up and hand it back to Ahmed.